Okay, so we will come back to the topic we were just discussing, which is accessibility. Actually, let's go into our icebreaker first to warm everybody up, and then we'll go into your demos, and then we'll come back to the discussion we were having. So, um, the icebreaker was share something you recently learned about HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, or something you just think is cool about one of those things. And I had an answer for the thing I wanted to share, but my brain has completely shifted. So, Megan, if you have one, I'm gonna go to you first, and then we'll come back around to me.
Sure. Mine is like a little tangential. It's tangential to HTML, I guess. So at work right now, we're doing a lot of work with XSLT, which is a language I had never heard of. It's like for translating XML from like one format, like one XML structure to a different XML structure.
Mhm.
Um, so like we're using it to transfer data between two CMSs, which expect data in a different way. But because HTML files are also just like markup language, you can also use it for that. So that's a thing I'm learning more about than I ever thought I would need to know. I think I guess it's a cool feature because you can
It's
like
cool, I guess, how
translate,
all these languages are basically interoperable to a certain extent, but it also sounds
right?
like a mind-numbing problem getting them to talk, getting these CMSs to talk to each other.
Yeah, it is a little bit, but in a good way. Does anybody
Who's
else have
going
one, or
next?
I can popcorn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone you want to anyone want to share? You can just jump in with a fun fact.
I can share. Also kind of tangentially related, but at work we are using Tailwind, which is a framework of CSS. Maybe you guys have used it, but this is nothing new, but recently we've installed Prettier for Tailwind, which like is shockingly kind of like very nice. It's just prettier, but like formats your Tailwind for you. So that has been kind of fun. Um, but yeah, if you guys haven't used Tailwind yet, I would recommend it. I know it's kind of like controversial. People like love it or they don't like it. I like it. I feel like it makes things a lot easier, especially if you're working with a team, so you don't get like jumbled in each other's CSS files. Like in my cohort last time, we didn't use Tailwind or anything. We just used like plain old CSS files, and we just ended up like each writing our own style for like the same component, and it got really messy. And I think Tailwind kind of takes that problem away because it just adds the CSS to like the components themselves. Um, but yeah, that's my, I don't know, new exciting event that happened this week. Should
Nice.
I popcorn or just want to say
I have
some?
mine and then I'll popcorn. I figured out what I was going to say before, which is I have a very niche HTML attribute to share with y'all, and I think the best way to share it would be in this graphic that I found. It is the input mode attribute that goes onto input fields. And you may have heard that inputs can take a type attribute for like text, email, password, things like that. Um, but there are cases where it's actually not good to use certain input types because they're not accessible. The number input is not accessible. The steppers that are come by default from browsers are too small and they aren't communicated properly to assist technology. So what you can do with the input mode is have a type of text, but use input mode to change the virtual keyboard that the smartphone user would get. So if you have an input that is typed text, but input mode of number, they get the numeric keypad, which is a way of telling the user exactly what input you want them to give without having them hunt down for like only certain keys on a larger keyboard. That's my hot take. I often talk about this one because no one knows about it. It's very fun. It's very useful. Okay, so I'm trying to remember who's gone. Doorbell, have you gone?
Oh, I have not. Hi, everyone. So for me, I would say it would be in something pertaining to issue number 5. So one of our tasks was to ensure that the user can submit the form by either clicking or hitting enter. So we did some research and we found out that this tiny little gem, this tiny change of changing type from button to submit helps do that. So I was just used to typing submit, but I didn't really understand before what the point of that is. And then in terms of like reading more about accessibility and I think it's the label. So learning that area label, right? I think if I remember correctly, it helps, it provides like a text label for objects like button. So I think that's it for me.
Cool. And I think we have Nick and Stacy left, right?
Sorry about that. Yes.
No worries.
And
Stacy next.
Oh, introduction. Sorry. Yes. Go ahead, Stacy.
Hi guys, happy Saturday. I do love working in the front end, and so what I do find cool in JavaScript is events. The fact that a user is able to interact with the web page, whether it's clicking a button, whether it's opening up another page, another link. So I do find that super cool. This is what drew me to being in the tech field, so I love that. I'm gonna pop it to Nick.
Thanks, Stacey. Okay, so I'm trying to think. Yeah, something that I came across recently that I thought was really cool. So you may have heard of like passing by reference versus passing by value. If you're working with primitive types, you can copy one variable to another, and they're independent of each other, right? You can alter one without altering the other, but it doesn't work that way with objects and array or objects in general in JavaScript because of passing by reference. So if you have two variables, you say like I have object one and then I try to assign object two to object one, they both point to the same thing, right? So there are ways around this. You may have taken an array and used the slice method to make a copy of an array, so you can modify one array without changing the other. But what if you have a nested object, an object with objects inside of it? Maybe we have an object with an array inside of it. If you try to do this kind of copying, you might get to the top level, but you've made, I believe it's called a shallow copy, and you'll have issues with the nested things. They'll still be references, right? So you don't have a deep copy. And I found something recently called a method called structured clone. So if you want to make a copy of a complex object with lots of nested object types inside of it, you can use the structured clone method. And then you get a completely fresh object that you can alter in any way you want without modifying the original. So I thought that was really cool.
So what I'm hearing, and I had this idea when I first wrote down this icebreaker, is there should be lightning talks on each of our little features that we like about these languages, and you should give a lightning talk on pass by reference.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, because talking about it would help me to clarify the concept in my head. As soon as I started talking about it, it was like, oh yeah, I know this, but it's kind of hard to explain. But sure, I'd love to do that.
We could schedule that too. Is that something we're interested in? Like just setting aside time for everyone to give like a 5-minute little presentation on something. Maybe graphics would help with a situation like what you're describing.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm sure there are some. I was even looking for some while you were talking. I've seen some graphics that kind of describe what you're talking about, but it's really hard without an illustration in a lot of ways to get that out there.
Yeah, I think definitely looking at a visualization of the difference between reference and value helps to see like the different addresses in memory versus like one address in memory with 2 pointers or something like that.
Also, just because you were talking, we are complimenting your room that you're in. It's very nice.
Yes, I'm cat sitting now, and my friends have lovely taste. I chose to set up in front of their giant little garden area here. So
you should ask to cat sit every week so that you just look cool.
I know.
Outshine all of us.
Yeah, I don't know where the cat is actually, but I saw him for a second. He's like, "Oh, you're here. Okay."
We have Shiveksha left, right?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So one of the cool things about JavaScript that I love is the structuring of objects and array. So it makes code cleaner, easier to manage and read. And I also love the nested destruction when dealing with complex data where values are nested deeply. And recently I found out that we can combine both array and object into destructuring to handle more complex structures. I really feel cool about it. And also another I liked is the set timeout method. Like I found it really cool when I did, like when it renders like something, we can have it to schedule it later at certain time after a number of milliseconds. I really liked about that, and I feel it really cool. Yeah, thank you.
I agree. I've tried to avoid set timeouts because I have it in my head that like there's better ways to do things than let a number arbitrarily count down. But I actually needed it for work 2 weeks ago, and it like changed my life being able to actually need it for something. And going back to the destructuring, Megan, I'm sure you also remember a time before that was something we could just do. And so you back in our day, we didn't have it like this, like you kids do these days. Okay. Any other fun facts you want to share? Any comments on anyone else's fun facts? Because if not, we can go right into demos and show off the work you did this week. No more comments. Okay. So I'm gonna volunteer unless someone disagrees. Going on number 4, we had Nick and Shveksha. So do y'all want to go first, or do y'all want to wait?
Yeah, we can do first.
Fine.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Shveksha, would you
Sure.
like to share?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Another presentation. Sorry. It's just
Yeah.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
All right. So we had issue number 4. I worked on this with Shveksha and I. Let's see. So issue number 4 was to set up a form for a new shopping list so the user can start tracking purchased items. Our assignment was to display a form that allows the user to enter the name of a shopping list and then create a list with that name. We were to provide a semantic label for the input and also provide form submission through pressing enter or by clicking submit button. And we also wanted to include a message indicating the status of list creation, whether it was a success or failure. Finally, two more things. We want to store the newly created list path in the local storage, and then also navigate to the list page once we have that path. So the way we went about doing this is we passed the user prop from to the home component from app.jsx, and then we created a form with a label, input, and a submit button inside home.jsx, and then created a state for the new list name, which is tied to the input. So when you enter something into the input, it updates the state. So when submitted, handle submit is going to call create list from firebase.js, and create list now awaits update doc and then returns the list doc ref path property, which is our path to the new list. This value is going to be used by set list path, which sets the list path state and also stores it in the local storage. Finally, handle submit is going to use the use navigate hook to navigate the user to the list page of the newly created list.
Hello, this is Shveksha. Now moving on to testing and career criteria. Firstly, we'll sign in with an email. So if you try to submit without entering anything in there, we should get an alert. Then if we type any shopping name in there and either click or enter submit button, we should see a success alert and it navigates to the list page. So this is the code changes that we did in home.jsx with the changes in the state, that's with the list name, and also there is function for handle change and handle submit for the submit button. So this is another one for the form, code changes for the form with input field and submit button. And this is the code changes for the firebase.js file that we added await, and we return the list docref.path in there, and it creates list path and stores into the local storage. So another thing we added in the app.js with the user prop that is added in the home component, and it uses the prop for that home component in there. So now the demo. Here's our app in here. So at first, let me sign in. So this is, I am signed in as my name. So if you try to submit without writing anything in there, it gives an alert that please enter a valid name. So if we write anything in here like dinner menu, so and try to submit, says the list created successfully, and it stores into the local storage with this list path. And this is the item that we can be added later on in this app. And I think this would be all for the demo. And any questions and suggestions? Thank you. Okay,
Yay,
stop
great
sharing my
job.
screen. I'm gonna
That's
stop
awesome.
sharing.
Any
Yay.
questions from anyone for Nick and Shueksha?
Just wanted to mention you
One-
guys are kind of killing it with these presentations. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
very
Plus
intimidated.
one.
Very impressed. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Or don't feel a need to keep it up. But if you want to, I like the structure of the presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed when I was testing in the deploy preview is like when you're on the home page and it shows you like a list of it shows you a list of all of the lists. Like when you click on one, it changes the value in local storage, but you don't actually see anything as a regular user. And I don't think this was in the acceptance criteria for your ticket, so it makes sense that like it doesn't do anything. But like later when we get to the design, like redesigning sessions, that might be a good thing to look at. I don't know what it would do when you click on one, but just to think about, like, as a user, what would you want to see happen when you have changed your list?
Absolutely.
How would you want to
Yeah.
confirm to the user that they know something happened?
Right,
Like, how would you
exactly.
want to, yeah.
For sure. And I also noticed, after we fulfilled the acceptance criteria, we were talking about the fact that once you've created this new list, you get navigated to the list page. But by definition, because you just created it, we know that the list will be empty. So maybe we could provide some kind of feedback to the user as well to like navigate them over to manage list, or some kind of message to be like, this, you just created this list, you want to add something to it, something along those lines, as well as like matching up our alert messages to look a little bit more like, we noticed that the other group put like rendered messages to the screen. So maybe getting some of that stuff kind of universal, just to have it look nicer.
One thing to consider as you're going into design too is you'll get an explicit issue later on to provide introductory content to explain more about what the shopping list is and how it's used. And in terms of content design and like user experience design, it helps to level set certain behaviors ahead of time as much as to explain something after it's happened. So if you tell a user what's going to happen when they do something, that's just as helpful, if not more helpful for some people than trying to explain that something happened after they take an action, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And since Megan's our resident developer educator, I'm sure she could say a lot more about that, a lot more eloquently than I could. But for now,
great.
I think, yeah, thank you. I just try to be like you. Unless anyone has other questions, I think we can move on then to the next team. So, are we ready? Let's see.
Hi, Stacey. Would you like for me to share my screen?
Sure. I thought it was another team. I didn't know it was us. No, just teasing.
It's my turn actually to surprise demo. Just throw it in there. Yeah. Oh, I like the colors. Okay, go ahead.
Do you want me to?
So we did come up with the name Recorded Purchases, and it was demo issue number 5 with me, of course, and Doribella. Did I say it correctly?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Tercero Parker. Yep.
Yes. I think it has a little delay. So yeah, so we were tasked with implementing both UI and data functionality for adding items to a shopping list. The UI related tasks were implementing a form in the manage list view, allowing users to input an item's name and choose a time frame for the next purchase, whether it was soon, which is 7 days, kind of soon, 14 days, or even not soon, 30 days. We ensured that the items name were input, the input field is semantically labeled, which shifts the focus to the input field when clicking, when typing your list name, We optimized form submission process, enabling the users to submit the form either by using the mouse or the enter button for a seamless experience. Of course, for more information, you could click the link. We did do a lot of Googling for that. And we added feedback functionality, which notifies users whether the item was successfully saved into the database. And with the data-related task, we updated the add item function in the API Firebase JS file to utilize the add doc method for adding new documents to a Firestore, replacing the previous console.log statement. And of course, you could always click the link. We did do a little, again, research for that because neither one of us worked in Firebase before. We implemented logic to calculate the days until the next purchase based on a user selected time frame. And we ensured that the new items were automatically reflected in the list view by fetching update data from the Firestore via the use shopping list data hook whenever the changes occur in the database.
Thank you, Stacy. So next we're going to move on to the testing steps and quality assurance criteria. So I'm going to be demoing this next, but first, as usual, you sign in using your Gmail account. You navigate to the manage list page. You click on the item name label to ensure it shifts the focus to the input field. Enter an item name in the input field. Select the appropriate time frame for when the item is needed, and submit the form by either clicking the add item or pressing the enter key. And then a message indicating whether the item was successfully added to the database or not should appear. And then the user is to navigate to the list page to verify that the newly added item appears correctly. Finally, confirm that the item has been added to the database along with the correct days until next purchase value. So, oops. Next, let me make this a little smaller. So in terms of the code, like the first team, we first started with the database. So we replaced the console log with add doc. And now what this add doc function does is it generates a new document and it also auto generates IDs. So we don't have to generate the IDs, the database does it for us. Then we went on to, well, with the help of the entire team, we realized that we needed to pass the list path prop to manage list component. So here we added list path. And then lastly, in the manage list component, we have list path here in the add item function. And in the bottom, as I said, and we did set the message and state, which I know some of the members had feedback on that. So I'd love to hear what others think, whether alerts make more sense or if to set a message and state makes, when I did research, it said that there's pros and cons for both. So it all depends on how you want to envision your app functionality. And then in terms of the actual demo, here we go. So I am logged in at this point. So I'm going to say that I would like some tortillas. I need them soon. I'm going to add item. The item was successfully added to the database. And when we navigate to the database, you will see something like this, where it says date created, and then date next purchase based on your selection. And if we head on over to list, we see the fias added. And I believe that's it. So let me go on to our last adorable slide. Here we go. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
That was great. I also want to say, I think maybe you threw down this gauntlet of everyone and putting these cute little gifts at the end of their presentations, because I think the first time you did it was you. So
yeah, that was Doribel's idea, and I really loved it. And we started doing that.
Well, then thank you all for setting this trend. Now I want different gifts every week to see how many cute gifts we can all find for our presentations.
We'll try to do it.
Seriously, great job. That was very good. Any comments or questions for our team?
I have two small comments. First of all, it looks really good. And these are just like extra things you could think about when you get to like the design portion of this program. But the first thing, I liked your like message to the user, like this item has been added to the database. When you think about like creating messages though, you can think about like who's using this app, right? Like, and so maybe instead of saying this has been added to the database, you can say something like this has been added to your shopping list or something, right? Because maybe they don't really care that it's been added to the database. They just want to know that it's been added to their list successfully. If you're thinking about the typical user.
Thank you for that. I have a follow-up question to that, because in the instructions, it said that we had to specify it's added to the database, but I agree. When I read that, I was like, ooh,
Okay.
it doesn't make sense for a user to read that, but we also are expected to follow the instructions. So it's a little bit,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I agree. But that's what it said in the instructions to do.
Oh, okay. That's perfectly fine then. I did not read the issue, but I mean, this is just like user experience. When you get to it, just follow the directions for now. What was the other one? I don't remember. Just come back to me. Where
I'll
was
say in Dory Bell's defense, we did write that, and that's honestly on us for not using different language. But I think maybe the intention of the issue was to like take the knowledge that you as the developer knew that we were saving the database, but that the user should not have to see that word in particular. So you did the right thing by following the instructions. But I think Jenny's also right in that we're thinking of the users who typically don't know what a database is and don't care what a database is, right? So in the future, you want to do something like she said, like how would you want somebody who doesn't know what a JavaScript is to read that message?
I will also add that like it in the real world, like you would get a design from a designer, which would have the text in there for what it should say. So that like wouldn't be a call that you would have to make. But if you know, depending on the team, like if you had feedback on what the messages were, you could go back to the designer and talk about it. But normally by the time that it gets to you, somebody else has already figured out what the exact copy will be.
It does help to have feelings and thoughts about this because you can always contribute at some point on your team, depending on who you are, depending on who's available to help out with copy. I've been in meetings where copy was the only thing we talked about for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. So it really does matter to think carefully about what the user is experiencing. So if you can hone these questions and develop what you think is the right thing to say to a user, that's very helpful to bring to a team. And the more you can think about product in general, product design, product experience, the more you can stand out in job interviews as well.
Yeah. Also, like on a bigger team, I would say you'll definitely have a designer and probably a UX writer as well, who like spend hours and hours thinking about the perfect word to use. But like if you work at a startup, which I am now, there are no rules. Like I'm the designer, I'm the UX writer right now. So I think it's a good habit to like think about it, especially if you're a front-end designer, to start to like you'll be thinking a lot about the user experience, or at least that's what I am doing a lot these days. So depends on what kind of team you join.
Any other questions, comments?
I remember my other thing as well. I
Go ahead.
noticed, and I think this was confusing in my cohort too. Like when you go to manage list, you don't know which list you are updating, right? Like on the screen. That one in my cohort, that was confusing because when you're at home, you click a list and then under like the cover, it sets it as active or whatever. But then when you go to manage lists, it's hard to tell where you're at. So this is also like when you get to the design portion, just make sure there's like feedback on the screen of like what list you're actually updating. I'm sure you guys will have thought about this, and we'll get to it.
Sure.
How about when you have no list? Inside joke between EJ and Doorbell.
Yeah.
Inside joke when I kept updating. I was like, "What is wrong? I have no list."
So we never added Stacy's username to the database, and so Stacy had no lists and could not save anything, and I had to go in and do it, but I hadn't done it correctly before, so I did it wrong, and we were like, "What did I do?" for 10 minutes until I went and fixed it. Spoilers. I made the list as a reference, but not as an array of references. So it was never, it couldn't map over Stacy's lists from the database. So the map method belongs to arrays. Fun fact, I learned that this week, everybody. Brand new developer here. Seriously, great work. And again, thank you to Raybell and Stacy for being patient with me as I got that wrong. Any other questions?
Showing up, you showed up right away, and thank you, Jenny, for sharing. I love hearing like what the day-to-day looks like. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Even if you have some set instructions, it's okay to in your mind go off and be like, I wonder if this would make more sense. And
also, in the future, if you have that question, you can just ask us. Ask us in Slack. If you don't like something that's written down, or you think maybe it's unclear, or that you're making an assumption that you think is correct, just confirm with us. It's totally okay to go a little bit off book.
We could set some time or have an office hour dedicated to like hearing about our day-to-days if that's something you're curious about. I remember not so long ago I was very, very curious about it. Like, so yeah, we're happy to do that. I'm speaking for all the mentors, but I'm sure we will be happy
Yeah,
to.
we would all be happy to do that, definitely. So I don't know who exactly came in when I made this decision, but I'm not doing the presentation that's actually assigned in the project brief because I don't like it, and that's okay with me because I wrote it and I'm allowed to not like it. So what I want to do instead to talk about accessibility is first kind of hear about everyone's experience with accessibility, whether it's you don't know anything at all, or I learned some stuff this week. Let's just talk about it for a second, and then I have an idea for a little bit of a demo. I'll pick on somebody to go first if no one volunteers. Okay, Megan.
So we're talking about what we know about accessibility, or I zoned out. Okay. I hadn't done, well, we had done like a little bit of accessibility, like somebody else had mentioned, like alt text for images, but that was sort of the extent of what I knew about it until I got to my first developer job. And then there I was staffed at like a larger like e-commerce company. And so I was like building their website, and they had a whole accessibility, like I forget what they called them, but like basically like a center of excellence where it's like people staffed at the company whose entire job is to be there as like the accessibility consultants for the other software developers. And so that's like one of my first tickets that I remember getting was an accessibility issue, where there's like some problem with the screen reader. So I was like learning a lot about how screen readers work. And it came out like as we were resolving that issue, it was like, oh, this would have been easier. Like we wouldn't have had this problem if we had been thinking about accessibility in the design phase, like before we start developing. So that was like my first exposure to the idea of shifting left and like thinking about accessibility from the beginning of your project, so that you can like build intentionally, as opposed to getting down the road where you're like, oh no, this doesn't work, and it's hard to fix now because everything's already built. So yeah, a bit of a rambling answer.
If you want to add to what Megan's saying or add your own experience. You don't have to wait in line. We can be impolite here. Just jump off, Mike.
I have a question. I don't know if it's me. Maybe I'm confused. I really thought that web accessibility was being able to view the web page on every different item, whether it's a cell phone, your laptop, your desktop, your tablet, and also being able to help whether it's disabled people, being able to read the web page as well. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're right. You're right about both of those things, I would say. The ability to access on your chosen device is very important. But there's multiple kinds of access. And so specifically in the context of web accessibility, people typically mean the ability to serve something that works for disabled users who are using whatever technology of choice. So all kinds of access are important, whether we're talking about language barriers or access based on economic disparity, which is also very important. And these things all come together. They're never separate. But specifically, people are typically discussing the ability to access something if you have a disability, and because things can be made badly so that you can't understand the information on page or access it at all. Does that answer your question at all?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so these are all important, and you're welcome to talk about those things too, because they're important to all of us here, I'm sure. But specifically, this presentation was going to be about making technology that works for disabled users. It's a good question, though. It's a very good question that I think bears disambiguating in the beginning. So that's my bad. Anyone else have anything they want to share as to their knowledge of accessibility or lack thereof? That's okay too.
I have to say my knowledge ended when my cohort ended. Like I feel like I focus on it for this program, which is great, but unfortunately at my current job, that's not really a priority. And so yeah, I feel like my knowledge is as beginner as maybe other people in the room. So I'm excited for this presentation or to hear this presentation again. I will say, I guess like, and Megan and EJ, you guys have more experience, but I think sometimes it becomes a priority if like the users may need it, right? Like right now at my company, our software is only used by like a select handful of internal users who, I mean, maybe are currently just don't have the need for like accessible web apps. And so if you're building a tool like that, maybe that will be less of a priority. But if you're building like a website or like a web app that can be used by, more general people, that will definitely be a priority. But that's just my kind of experience on like why or why not companies may or like product teams may focus on it or they might not. EJ or Megan, do you guys have more experience based on like,
Yeah.
the products you worked on?
I think you're right, but I think also it's worth saying that that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if you make something that's for internal users and say, oh, no one here is blind, so we don't need to make this accessible to a screen reader, then you will guarantee that you can never ever hire a blind person to work with you. And so this is me soapboxing, but you've unlocked my trap card. I'm so sorry. But it's really important to not assume that because no users have disclosed they have disabilities that you don't need to serve those people. Because what happens if you don't make something accessible, you guarantee that you'll never get feedback from those people because they can't use your product to give you feedback in the first place.
It's very, very true.
Yeah. The other thing that this is making me think of, well, there's a couple things. The first thing is that like we are all of us only temporarily able-bodied, right? Like eventually we'll hit a point where either we'll get older and like something will happen, or we'll have an accident and something will happen, and like you won't be able to engage with software in the way that you maybe did before. And so planning ahead for those inevitabilities helps make it so that it's not suddenly like, oh no, I broke my arm and like now I can't use my keyboard and now I like can't do my job. And then there was a second thing that it made me think of, and I forgot what it is. Oh, if you like, even though other people at the company might not know about how to make things accessible or might not be prioritizing that, as a developer on the project, when you're in the planning meetings, something that has been something that I've tried to do is like ask the questions of like, okay, here's a design for something, like what should happen when the user like tabs through the elements on the page. Just to if you can be the one who asks the questions, then it's like, okay, now we are prioritizing it. It's like you're kind of sneaking it in of like, okay, great, this is part of the design process, is like talking about these questions, or like, oh, I noticed that the color contrast on these elements isn't sufficient. Like, what should we do about it? Like you can, even though the company as a whole may not be prioritizing accessibility, like you can sort of guerrilla warfare it in there of like, okay, we're talking about it now because I asked a question.
It's like
Yeah,
sneaking vegetables in your kid's food.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm taking notes because I want to read at some point. I think there's something called like the design or universal design principle, where it's like if you design for like as many people, like no matter what, like age, ability factors or whatever, the goal is to meet like the needs of all users, and then by doing that, you'll be creating a product that is like useful will benefit like all users. Someone needs to say it better than I am. But anyways, look up
No,
this
you're doing great.
Okay, all right. But yeah, there's like thought and research, I'm sure.
So I'm formulating a plan as we're talking about what this presentation is going to be. First of all, I think what we might do is switch to assigning the issues and getting all of our regular agenda out of the way so we have time to make sure you know what you're doing for the week, and then come back to a presentation just so that we have everything that we need to have covered. I'm totally improvising everything I'm saying and thinking as we do this, so work with me. Also, we'll have more chances to discuss this topic or any other topic that you want to talk about, so it's not a big deal. But to go on something that Megan was saying real quick to close this topic out, if you're like, oh gosh, I don't know how to design something that's inclusive to disabled users, or how do I serve people who have this particular condition or whatever, the best thing you can do to solve a problem for somebody is to ask questions that would lead you to self-discover a possible answer. So if Megan is in your meeting and saying, how do we know, have we tabbed through this with the keyboard? And you're like, what does that mean? That's like a pointed thing you can Google to learn something about accessibility. So rather than thinking of like this big, opaque topic, try to find things that actual questions that serve the problem you're trying to solve, and ask those questions and learn about that particular task or skill or bit of JavaScript, whatever, like you would do with anything else, rather than trying to solve the entire world's problems at one time. It's very helpful that way.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I will say, like, I'm also still learning stuff about different accessibility, like different ways to make different kinds of components accessible. It's like, it's not something that you are like, and now you know accessibility things. It's like you're always learning more. There's a ton of stuff to know, just like any other technology thing.
Totally. I'm always learning, and I've been doing this professionally for the last 5 years, I would say. I've been calling myself a specialist for that long. And you never know enough to serve everybody perfectly, but you're always learning, and you can always contribute in a way that's meaningful to somebody. Okay, what we're going to do, and I'm going to ask you to do this, Megan, because I have to go get a cough drop. I've been coughing off mic for the last 5 minutes. I'm okay. I think I have allergies or something. Megan, if you could handle the issue assignment roll thing, I'll be right back.
Yeah. Let me share my screen.
I'll be right back. Thank you, everyone.
This one. Okay. Is it this week? Yeah, this is the accessibility week. Okay. So these are our pairs. We've got Shuveksha and Stacy and Doribel and Nicholas. Let's pull up these two issues. Okay. Number 6. As a user, I want to be able to invite others to an existing shopping list. This sounds fun. Okay, so we want to allow users to invite others to existing shopping lists so they can manage them with friends or family. So then it gives you the steps. Users enter an existing email into a form, and then the share list function in source API Firebase is called with the appropriate inputs. So we could go, probably a good first step is to go check out what that function does. Okay, please note that an existing user is a user that is signed into the app before. So this one, I imagine you'll have to make a new form somewhere. I don't know if it's on a new page or if it's on the existing page. This could also be a place where, it's your issue. You get to decide what it looks like. Unless, Jenny, do you know where it goes?
It says manage list view, right?
Oh, does it? Wow, reading fundamental. Yeah. Okay, you're totally right. Add it to that page. Okay. So that's that one. And then this one, as a user, I want to filter my shopping list to make it easier to locate an item in the list. So this one is about searching, letting users search through the items in a list to cut down on clutter and focus on items that they're looking for. So this one sounds like it'll be more front end stuff. The other one includes some front end and some back end maybe. Okay, and then this one is on the list view. Any questions about either of these?
Oh, this one is fun. I had this one.
Nice.
Other one is good too, I'm sure.
Not biased or anything. Okay, cool. Any preferences on, I know these are the pairs that we're working with, but we don't have to assign these to these issues. Does anybody feel really strongly like, oh, I really want to try 6 or 7?
They're both fun. Forget I said anything.
Okay. Well, then we'll just go with the cards as they were dealt. All right, remember which pairs that you're on because I'm going to immediately forget this. This one was
Introduction
oh,
and
dang it,
Stacy.
every time I do that. Okay, they should really make another link for whatever. Okay, this one was Shubeksha and
Stacy.
who else? And Stacy, thank you. Stacy.
You know what, Megan? You're going to get to the last week and then not click yourself on the final
I
issue.
know. You know, miracles happen. And then this is 7. Nope, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. So then this one is Doribel. And come on. Oh, I guess. Whoop. Okay. We did it.
Yay.
All right.
Any questions
Let
about either
us
before we
know.
move on?
Yeah. Where's the suit?
And also, if questions come up about the ambiguity of the text in the issues, you can just yell at us, be like, I don't know what this means. Can we do it this way? And we'll tell you whether it's too far off script or not. Because the only thing we want to avoid is you working too hard too early. Otherwise,
Right.
though, small changes, totally fine.
Awesome.
Cool.
You're gonna do great.
Yeah, you have been so far. There's no reason to believe you wouldn't do great. You're doing so good. Okay, so I don't know what I'm doing. I never know what I'm doing. That's the fun part. I'm just here to figure it out in real time. Um, uh, I'm doing my best. That's right. You're so gosh darn right. Um, I think what we can do maybe is I had a thought. It's gone. I coughed my brain out while I was on mute, I think. What we'll do is I will try to, first of all, present my screen and maybe show, we can sketch some stuff in real time, like I keep telling everyone else to do. I could take my own advice for once in my life. That'd be so good. Um, by the way, I do plan to give everyone a link to the presentation I was going to give. It's not a bad presentation, but there's a lot of reading and there's a lot of stuff you could absorb on your own in your own time with this presentation. And if you have questions, you can always ask one of us about it. That's totally fine. But I wanted to use this time to present more information that I can give you in real time rather than just reading a script to you, essentially. Go ahead, Megan. Did you say something?
It is. I was just gonna say it is also linked in the project brief, so
That's
I'll
true.
grab that. I'll drop a link in the chat real quick. But that's
Yeah,
where you can find it if you are looking for it after the Zoom.
Sure. Okay. Can we see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Is this text size legible so far for everybody?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I'm going to first make some links because Megan was talking about tabbing through stuff. And if you don't know what the heck that means, we can fix that right now. I'm going to be lazy and copy these and change their text content because I don't have time.
While you're doing that, I'll
Sure.
like start a spiel. So one of the nice things about HTML is that a lot of the semantic HTML elements, like the built-in elements in the browser, already include a lot of accessibility features for you. So there's this idea of using what's called semantic HTML to just like mark up your content using these elements that already exist to give you a bunch of features for free, instead of trying to like, build a button component from scratch, like build your own custom button component. Instead, you could use the built-in like HTML button component, or elements, and that gives you a bunch of stuff like, it's tab focusable. If you click like, I think it's space or return, it will click on the button for you. So that's like a good baseline starting point of just like choosing the right element for the job.
Totally. So Megan was talking before about, speaking of HTML giving you some stuff for free. Things that are focusable, as in interactive, like buttons and links, you can tab to them using the keyboard. So if I press tab, can everyone see there's an indicator going around the word one to show up where our keyboard focus is? A sighted keyboard user would rely on this indicator to know where in the app they are. And so if I press tab again, it goes to the item 2, 3, and then to this disclosure, which is called a details and summary element in HTML, that if I hit enter, it expands and shows me the content. If I hit enter again, it contracts and hides the content. Similarly, I should have made a form, but that seems like the prototypical thing that people tab through. People who rely on a keyboard will typically tab through their forms in the same way. They'll enter their name, press tab, enter their last name, whatever other information is being required of them, and then they can hit enter anywhere in the form to submit it, as we've been telling you about in the issue so far. So I guess this is your first introduction to the idea that maybe your user might only rely on the keyboard. So you want to make sure that if there are important things in your app, that they can do all those things with the keyboard. And that you can also see as a user where your focus is as you're going through the app. So the color you're seeing is the browser's default blue indicator. But if your design is blue in the background, maybe this wouldn't work very well. So you'd want to design a custom indicator, which is a whole separate thing in CSS that we can talk about later at some point. But yeah, just make sure that as you're going through your apps and you're working on stuff, that your user can accomplish all the tasks that are important and they know where they are in the app as they're accomplishing tasks. I'm still thinking for my next chapter here. Anything you want to add, Megan? Any leading comments?
Not yet. I'm starting a thread in the team channel, just to drop like links and stuff as we're thinking of them.
Also, oh, I almost forgot an agenda item. I wanted to ask everyone when we wanted to have our testing workshop. And this is relevant because there's the way that we've designed the workshop, there'll be a chance to talk about more of the stuff, ask more questions, but also do some testing. So we had the idea that we would give it during one of our office hours. Would everyone be interested in having that be this coming office hours session?
That sounds great, for me at least.
Okay.
Yeah,
Anyone
that
super
works.
not available to do it this week or interested in doing it this week? No?
Also,
Okay,
as you
cool.
get into your issues, like if you have questions about your tickets that you're working on, we can push it back like day of too, if you have other things that you want to talk about.
Yeah.
But
getting you unblocked for your thing is more important, if that's necessary. But also, again, you don't need to wait until office hours or the next week to talk to us. If you have questions you think we can answer asynchronously, just be really loud in Slack. We'll come to you. Okay, cool. So we'll do our workshop on Wednesday, and it'll be partially us demoing how to do some tests, and then also prompting you to write some tests with our help as in pairs and things like that. I had another thought, but it is gone. I appreciate everyone humoring me as I figure this out. Again, I recommend reading the presentation that Megan linked to earlier. And if you have questions over the course of the week, we can talk about them too, or any other time. But I wanted to avoid sort of lecturing at you about this thing that you could mostly read, when in fact I think it's easier or better mostly to talk about stuff and to try to see practical examples. I was going to, I guess I can still show you what voiceover kind of sounds like. If I did this right and I didn't, I did it wrong. Should actually watch me do it the first time. You have to press a button to share your sound at the beginning. You can't just share your sound after you've already shared your screen. So I'm gonna unshare. I'm gonna share again and share sound. Okay, cool. Now if I start voiceover.
VoiceOver on Zoom Us. Zoom share status per window.
Okay, so I paused it, but did we all hear the robotic voice just now? Did we all hear it talking to us? Okay, cool. I'm gonna go over to
Chrome. Document Google Chrome. EJ. Window. Stuff. Collapsed. Disclosure triangle. Group. Has keyboard focus.
That was really slow and it's a lot of information, but what it's telling me is I'm focused on the stuff button over here. And if I go backwards,
Link. 3.
it tells me I'm on a link. It tells me what the content of the link is, so I know which link I'm on.
Link. 2. You are currently on a link inside of web content. To click this link, press Ctrl, Option, Space. To exit this web area, press Ctrl, Option, Shift, up arrow.
So what that next section tells you is how to interact with the content that you've discovered. And so if you come across some content as a blind user, you'll be reminded of how to use the tool as long as it's made correctly. In this case, they can click the link using the keyboard shortcut provided, and it's different for each technology, each tool that they might be using. But this is kind of the information that you get. It's all serial. It's all announced to you by your tool of choice. And another thing I want to say is, you might be thinking, oh, this is so slow. How does anyone live their life like this? A blind person who fully relies on a tool like this would listen much, much faster than this, and to a point where you and I could probably not follow them very well. To make a point, I will show you.
Rate 54, 80%, 85%. Link 2. Link 3. You are currently on a link inside of web content. To click this link, press Control Option Space. Stuff. Collapse. Disclosure triangle. Group. 3. Link.
And they'll often stop like after hearing the first thing because they know where they are. It's kind of like how you and I, when we're reading something, we can glance around and find something we want and realize that's not the right thing, then go somewhere else. So one thing to keep in mind if you're as you're practicing with these tools in the future, or if you're wondering how someone can accomplish tasks as a user, these people are experts in using their bodies the way that they're built and the way that you and I are. So don't try not to over design or under design in hopes that you're making something more inclusive that way. Just design as correctly as you can and wait for feedback in case there's something that's not correct or that's hard to use. I think I'll close it there to be mindful of everyone's time. Any comments, questions, or concerns as we head into the week of your next 2 issues? Nobody has anything to say? Cool. I will take that as perfect knowledge. No questions, no concerns. You'll all do great.
I was gonna say thank you for the demonstration. I had no idea about the details option in HTML. So that was really interesting to learn.
Yeah. I wanted to yes and on something Megan said earlier, actually. There are times when the things the browser gives you for free actually break for screen reader users and things like that. There is a bug in Safari where if you use a details element, it doesn't report correctly in VoiceOver. So you have no idea what's happening. So generally, you want to assume that the stuff that the language gives you is good and usable, but you always want to check. You always want to check for edge cases or test with tools to make sure that the users who rely on the tools can use those things. So to repeat what I said earlier, another example is the number input comes from HTML, but it actually sucks. It's actually bad. Don't ever use it. Same thing with the date input, which creates a date picker. Don't use it. It's not good. There are things like that it's worth checking. Just if you're ever not sure, it would behoove you to try something with a piece of technology and see if it at least makes sense, or ask somebody who uses that technology to give you feedback.
EJ, I guess I have a question based on what you just described. Does that mean that when we're designing for accessibility, we have to take into account different browsers? Are different browsers going to have different screen readers? And okay, so you'd be making like different conditionals for whatever browser they're in and how you want to interact with the page.
You wouldn't necessarily write code that changes based on the browser, because that's hard to account for, because browsers also change their feature support all the time.
Sure.
But what you do is you just test with the most common combinations of tools that you can think of. So just like all of us might have a preferred favorite browser because we like it the best or we find it the most usable, people who rely on assistive technologies tend to pair those technologies with certain browsers because those browsers support those technologies the best. On macOS, because VoiceOver is built into macOS and Safari is Apple's browser, Safari tends to be the tool of choice for people who are blind and rely on VoiceOver, because those two they play nicest together. That's not necessarily true all the time, and Chrome and Firefox have made huge leaps and bounds of better supporting VoiceOver over the years. But if you wanted to go on averages, you would pair VoiceOver with Safari and test those two tools together. On Windows, there are different tools, and now I'm going past time, but you open Pandora's box. There is a free screen reader called NVDA, which you can download, and it's free and open source. It's very powerful. NVDA is the most popular screen reader by numbers, not just for Windows, but like of all time, even next to some of the older paid ones. And so you test NVDA with Chrome because that's the one that works best with Chrome. But also, you don't necessarily want to just exclude users who might prefer Firefox or whatever else. So it's worth testing. But you might also find that if, for instance, VoiceOver didn't work at all on Firefox until like 2 years ago. So no one who was blind used Firefox. So it helps to kind of know that landscape a little bit. And I can link to some studies about that if you want to read more about what tools are paired with what and things like that. But in general, if you have Windows, I'd recommend downloading NVDA. I can give a link unless Megan's looking up a link to that already. If you have Mac OS, you can start VoiceOver, which is built into Mac OS, and start practicing there. Also, one of the easiest ways to practice with a screen reader for the first time might be to start it up on your phone, because phone interfaces tend to be simpler, and you can kind of get through them with a little bit less cognitive load by swiping around than trying to use it with your keyboard and mouse on your desktop, laptop, whatever. Okay, now I'm done. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Megan, you look like I shot you when I said that the details element was broken.
We just at work started using that for something, and I'm like, oh no.
You can't. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Do you have docs? I was gonna message you. Will you send me docs on
I can
something?
send you the bug kit links.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, I think they fixed it in WebKit. Now we're talking about browsers. I'm sorry, everybody. But the thing is, because it was broken for a version of Safari for so long, you now have to wait until every single person is no longer on that version of Safari.
It's like the Internet Explorer of it all.
Yeah. This is another thing you consider as a front-end developer, by the way. Who in your audience is using what browser and what are your user metrics? So like, if something is broken in Safari 14, you need to make sure that every single person is no longer on Safari 14, or that you have some kind of fix for those users. That's something you consider, which is a whole other ballgame that can take up your life. But Megan, I will send you links just so you can go back to work.
Selfishly,
I have some bad news.
Yeah. Oh no.
All right. Thank you everyone for your extra time. As always, it's been a pleasure. If you need anything from us, let us know. Otherwise, we'll see you on Wednesday or Tuesday. Excuse me. I know what day it is. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.